Today, week 3 of our positional rankings in the NBA. We're doing small forwards. Let's get into foul trouble.
Remember the good old days when positions used to mean something, James?
Yeah, so this is week 3 of Patrick and I doing top 10 at every position in the NBA. And we went into this exercise being strictly whatever they're listed on their team's website, their team's depth chart, is the position we'll rank them as. And, this has led to some confusion. Last week, we both had you had Kobe White, I had Zach LaVine on our shooting guards list. And this week, it was the week I realized that this was a complete exercise in futility because Jameson Williams on the Thunder.
Jaylen.
It is early in the morning on the Thunder. Obviously, he's someone who belongs on one of these top 10 lists. Patrick was operating under the assumption he was a power forward. I was operating under the assumption he was a small forward, and the Thunder are saying he's a shooting guard. So that's why he wasn't on our shooting guard list. I don't know. So I guess that's the issue with the way we've done this exercise is we now cannot put him on the small forwards list, but we have both omitted him from the shooting guards list when he would probably be toward the middle of that.
If he was on my shooting guard list, just looking at it right here, we just discussed this morning, but I would probably put him where I had Desmond Bane at 5.
Yeah, that's where I would have him at 5 as well.
I think he fits there. Like I would rather have him. I think he's just a better offensive player than a Derek White or a Mikal Bridges, but also like a pretty high-end defensive player, not like a complete stopper like one of those two. But yeah, above guys like Austin Reeves, CJ McCollum, Jalen Green.
Yep, fully agree. I would have him behind the Mitchell, Booker, Edwards, Kyrie Irving foursome.
I'm sorry, Oklahoma City fans. We love you. We love you guys. You know we do. We would never do this on purpose. But I don't think we have anyone on your team in this list today.
Well, okay.
We might.
I don't know.
It's kind of after you get a little bit down this small forward list, it's kind of a poo-poo platter of like very unperfect players.
Yeah. So another thing, again, because Patrick and I are really trying to strictly follow this adherence to the position they're listed at, for the sole purpose of Patrick and I trying to avoid a situation like we had last week where I'll have a guy and Patrick will have that guy on a different team's list. We are going to say LeBron James oddly is listed as the team's power forward, even though I think nominally everybody thinks he's the small forward on the Lakers, but Rui's listed as the 4, so we're going to adhere to the Lakers positioning, which means our power forward list next week is going to have guys like Jason Tatum, who we all think of as a 3, is listed as a 4. Kevin Durant, often thought of as 3, listed as a 4. So next week's episode is going to be probably the most heavy-hitting list of all of these, but it's left a weird spot here.
It definitely. You think of like even I think in the modern NBA, just like 2, 3, 4 all blend together so much that like the old like slogan was like you are who you guard, and now it's like you guard a different position depending on the team who you play, and depending on like your offensive roles. So we're trying to represent this as purely as possible. And that brings us, I think, to our number 10 positions.
Yeah, number 10.
I'll tell you who I had. One of my favorite players from the playoffs last season. Honestly, one of my favorite players just like stylistically once you get to the playoffs in the league who's not a star player, and that's Josh Hart.
Okay, yeah, I like Josh Hart at 10.
I struggled to put Josh Hart any higher than this just because I think there's a clear cap on what Josh Hart can do from a scoring standpoint. He's really, for his entire career, hovered around this like 10 points per game. The huge difference that we saw in the playoffs is last year in the playoffs, he shot 37% from 3 on 4.5 attempts a game, which is just like makes him a completely different player. But Josh Hart might be the best rebounder on this entire list. He averaged 14 rebounds per 100 possessions in the playoffs, which is just like game changing. And of course, that is on playing like nearly 48 minutes a game for a lot of the playoffs. But really great at like drawing contact, and drawing shooting fouls, not an amazing free throw shooter, but that I guess that comes with just the landscape that we're in. James, who did you have at number 10?
So I would like to change my number 10 to Josh Hart, if that's okay.
I will allow it. I will allow it.
Initially, I really struggled with this list. I kind of had a bunch of names here. I had Michael Porter Jr. here. I had Lou Dort here. I had Danny Advia here. Two other guys I just want to quickly mention now that I'm looking at my list again. OG Anunoby, another guy that we think is a 3, listed as a 4. And Brandon Miller, who I assumed was listed as a 3 this whole time, who was listed as a 2.
He was listed
As a 2. Yeah.
That's crazy.
'Cause
I probably wouldn't have had him.
I don't think I
in
would
the
have had
top
him,
10?
but I was doing my, does Brandon Miller deserve to be here? I was trying to look at his rookie year, first half, second half splits, just to see, is there the case to be made that by the end of the year, I think he'll be here, so I'll put him here now. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really know how to parse between, the Lou Dorts, Michael Porter Jr.'s, Danny Advia's, but I do like Hart in that spot better. I mean, he's averaging... Right now, I mean, the sample size is small. This will drift down a little bit, but 2 offensive rebounds a game. I mean, that's better than a lot of big men when you're averaging almost 2 offensive rebounds a game, which he did all of the last 5 years between his years in New York and Portland. And I just think that hustle play, especially in the playoffs, really, really made a big difference. I am a little cautious to overrate him because he had that weird thing last year where he shot a 3 and he said his wrist clicked, and now he's now I know how to shoot. And then again, small sample size, 6 games, he's not learned how to shoot.
Yeah, he's just about back to where he normally is.
So I mean, if he can level out at a 35% 3-point shooter, which oddly enough he just hasn't done, is 3-point shooting is a little crazy. It's 37, 30, 51, 31. So I don't know what's going to go on with his shooting long term. But no, I love Josh Hart. The defense, the rebounding is huge. It's one of those things where normally I don't view rebounding as a big enough player trait to really over or kind of move guys up and down too much on a list like this, but he was a big difference maker in that Knicks series versus the Sixers.
Yeah, I mean, my thing coming from a guy that's you can reliably have him guard the best guard on the other team, and he also rebounds well enough to really make it so that you don't have to have a dominant rebounder at your 4 or at your 5, or at least that's how well he rebounded in the playoffs. It just gives you the opportunity to have a lot of positional versatility down at the bigger positions in your lineups. I think my first guy that I cut from this list, my first guy out was Michael Porter Jr. 6'10", to have a guy that is as effective shooting from 3 as Michael Porter Jr., that is a real 6'10". I think sometimes when you look at Michael Porter Jr., he looks like he's 7 foot, but shot 39% last year, 41% the year before that on 7 attempts a game. Just a really elite 3-point shooter, like I said, but really offers nothing else.
Yeah, the lateral quickness deficiencies he has makes him such a bad defender out in the perimeter, which is why I think Porter Jr., if he does get moved on from Denver, is going to be playing the 4 the rest of his career.
Yeah. And sometimes if he hits the right matchup, he can, I think, defend effectively, but just offers no creation at all.
He's nicknamed the black hole for a reason.
Even from his position, and then also doesn't not reliable to attack the rim very much at all, which is something that a lot of people hope for from him coming into the league. And we really haven't seen him as a super effective rebounder, which to your point, if he was on another team, he would probably be their 4. Maybe it's because he shares the court so much with Aaron Gordon and Jokic, but I would be worried about his eye for rebounding as he positions up.
Yeah. Okay. Who did you, or I guess I'll just go. Number 9, I had Franz Wagner.
I had Franz on my list. I had Franz at number 7 on my list. At number 9, I had Brandon Ingram.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just not a big Franz Wagner guy. I just think the shooting deficiencies are pretty strong. He's not a strong mid-range shooter. He's not a strong 3-point shooter. And I think in this Paulo-less stretch the Magic have right now, it's kind of showing some of his flaws. I think kind of like Michael Porter Jr., although for different reasons. He's really more suited to play down as a 4 than he is on the perimeter as a 3, just because again, the shooting deficiencies are pretty strong. Now, he's a pretty talented playmaker at times. The volume of assists doesn't really reflect that, but I think he is a good defensive player. He has really good size. He's got good strength. I just don't know if the 3 is really his best position, and I think maybe that's why I'm a little bit lower on him.
Yeah, I mean, all the things that you said about Franz are why I like him. I think he does project out that as someone that you can really run an offense through. I love that he embraces getting to the rim a lot. Around 43% of his shots come at the rim, which especially in this day and age, I feel like it's hard to find more perimeter oriented guys that are comfortable getting to the rim. And from a shooting perspective, I feel like I kind of trust it coming back. I think last year he shot 28% from 3, which is an outlier from his career. Both of his previous seasons, he was around 36, 37% both years. This year, thus far, small sample size, but he's been at that 37% as well. I think if he can stay around 35, it's just the kind of thing as talented of just an offensive player overall as he is, you're going to have to guard him.
Yeah, my issue though was when I was looking at where his shots are coming from, it's basically 4 out of 10 shots come at the rim, and then it's an even 3 out of 10 come from mid, 3 out of 10 come from 3. And while the 3-point shooting, I guess, is 36, 37, 36, excluding last year's 28, but he's pretty much a career 40% mid-range guy, which is that's pretty bad. Especially it's difficult on this list because oddly enough, there's so many mid-range heavy people on this top 10 list.
Yeah. Well, but that's another thing why I think I had him above a guy like Brandon Ingram is say what you will, definitely not the 3-point shooter that Brandon Ingram is, but at least his shot diet is a little bit more
reflective of his skill set.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And he's at least generating some pressure on the rim, which Brandon Ingram is not bringing at all. He's really, really effective at drawing fouls. We saw that in the playoffs. About 17.5% of his fouls were shooting fouls, which was in the 96th percentile of playoff scorers last year, which was really awesome to see. A pretty good free throw shooter too, shot 85% last year, and a good rebounder. I just think I wonder how his efficiency gets as Orlando's spacing gets better. It's been kind of the worst possible scenario for a guy like that with shooting question marks to get better in. And I wonder, with the addition of KCP, with a full season, can he get just a little bit better to where he's enough of a threat everywhere that it affects it? I also think he's a better rebounder than a guy like Brandon Ingram.
Oh yeah, and definitely a better defensive player too.
Where did you have Brandon Ingram on your list?
I had him at 6.
Okay. Let me pull up my.
I had a incredibly difficult time parsing between 4 through 10.
Yeah, no. So I did as well. I guess I'll lay out the Brandon Ingram thing. So Brandon Ingram last season, 20 points per game, 5 rebounds, about 5.7 assists, which was more than I thought he would have.
Yeah, Ingram's actually a decent playmaker on the pick and roll ball handling side of things.
Yeah, the issue there is he's always been kind of a shaky turnover guy. Doesn't have exorbitant turnover numbers, but they're there. Especially compared to how much he's relied to play make for them, which is not very much.
Yeah, it's kind of funny we're talking about Franz Wagner being tailoring his play style to his strengths better than Ingram, because the first note I had on Ingram was a guy who's in desperate need of a play style change.
Yeah.
Because the sneaky thing with Brandon Ingram is he's a good 3-point shooter. He's at or near 40% a lot of the last few seasons, but it's he's never taking more than 18% of his shots as 3-point shots. And I think people think of him as a mid-range maestro, but he's kind of in that second tier of mid-range shooters. Mm-hmm. Where it's he's shooting more 45, 46%, which is pretty good on that type of volume, but it's not Devin Booker, right? That's what really separates someone like that from a Brandon Ingram is like Booker will be at like 51, which is a huge difference for like the, floor. Because usually the mid-range jump shot's like the offensive floor type of shot. And like, I also don't like that Brandon Ingram because of his shot diet that I don't love. His usage rate's at like 30% most seasons, which I just feel like given the quality of teammates Brandon Ingram's actually played with is a little too high.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think like I especially last season and the season before, I was kind of a Brandon Ingram apologist just because I saw him rise to the moment in the playoffs. The one time we saw him, what was it, that 3 years ago now against the Suns, 27 points per game, really, really efficiently. But then last season, they lose Zion in the play-in game. The Pelicans face the Thunder, and I think the Thunder kind of wrote the book on Brandon Ingram with Lou Dort. Obviously, not every team has a Lou Dort, but most teams have a guy that can be super, super physical, especially in this NBA, like the more embracing physicality new NBA that we saw at the second half of last season. It's just going to be where Brandon Ingram averaged as the clear number one option, 14 points a game on, 36% effective field goal percentage, which is just like awful for a number one option in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I had bring him at 6 just because I've really liked what I've seen from him so far. And that's what's kind of scary about doing these lists early in the season is like, is it small sample size? What's going on? Like his 3-point rate's up to 20%. That's not even really good, but will that hold? That'd be like a career high for him. Like, can we get this guy to take one of his fifths of his shot as a 3? Like, I would love that for him. Maybe he's embracing all the criticism he faced last season and it's reflecting in how he's played better. But it's kind of weird because, again, I guess, yeah, I mean, I've never been a big Brandon Ingram guy. It felt weird for me to put him as high as 6, but I just feel like he's better than 7 and 8 on my list.
Yeah, I would take the argument. You could probably get me with him up 3 spots on this list or down 3 spots on this list. The thing about Brandon Ingram, and I think this is kind of a good place to leave it, is just like he continues to be the guy that has all of the tools that any team is like hoping that someone will have that walks through their door. And I think the big question with him now is just like, is it just that he doesn't fit with the personnel around him in New Orleans? Or is it that he's more of a throwback player that would have excelled in a like early 2000s NBA or a 90s NBA?
I don't know. I just feel like the physicality can get to him at times, like you mentioned with Lou Dort. But okay, at number 8, I had his teammate Trey Murphy.
Oh, nice. You want to lay that out?
Yeah. So Trey Murphy hasn't played yet this season. So Trey Murphy's like the most unique player up and down this list. We talked about Porter Jr. as a movement shooter. So 2/3 of Trey Murphy's shot attempts are 3-pointers, and he's converting that at a 37% rate, which isn't like, jump off the page crazy. But I think sometimes we a little bit overrate the like 37 to 41% difference. Like in a game where a guy takes 9 shot attempts on average, they're going to make the same amount. The shooting percentage number isn't crazy, but the weird thing about Trey Murphy is he is taking more than half of his threes over 2 feet behind the 3-point line. So he's pretty much exclusively shooting like deeper threes.
He's like wing Eric Gordon, like really stretching out as a role player.
Yeah. And the reason I have Trey higher than Wagner is I just think that he's pretty much an elite release valve for any offense where he's like, I can space like crazy because I'll stand 2-3 feet behind the 3-point line and I'll shoot 37% no matter what. The reason I can't really have Trey higher is when he is tightly defended, he's only shooting just under 30%. So he's not one of these guys that's like a little like defender immune, which is kind of like the specialty of these DeRozan Ingram types at their mid-range game. And it's not blisteringly high when open and wide open. It's just kind of like 37%. He's going to stand there. But what I like about Trey Murphy is I do think he is an elite defensive player. I think he's a really good on-ball player. I think he's a good off-ball player. And I think just the consistency of just like, I'm always going to be there. I'm always going to be spacing. I'm going to be moving. High energy guy, pretty good athlete. Yeah, I would rather have him on most teams than Wagner or Porter Jr. or Lou Dort.
Yeah, I'm a Trey Murphy fan. I'm a huge Trey Murphy fan. I think another problem or like something that scares me about Trey Murphy is just the injury.
Yeah, he hasn't
history.
played this year.
He hasn't played this year. He started last year, I think, with a torn meniscus. Just a guy that seems to constantly be going through something. And for the most part, we've seen him be like a super role player, and I'm not sure how much more he has to grow from there. It could be a lot. If there's like, he's obviously hyper athletic, can finish in transition super effectively, but I just hadn't seen it enough to put him on this list. But I love that you have him there.
Who do you have at 8?
I had Brandon Ingram at 8.
Okay.
And then at 7, I had Bradley Beal.
I had DeMar DeRozan.
Which I think right here in this list, a lot of like very similar players. I think some guys that we might have thought as 2s earlier in their career. For Bradley Beal, I think we would pretty much always think of him as a 2 even today. But he's on the Phoenix Suns, and they start a true point guard in Devin Booker next to him. But I think the argument for Bradley Beal is just, a super efficient 3-level scorer, a guy that can really put pressure on the rim. Last year, shot 70% at the rim for the Suns. Obviously not like an insanely huge sample size, but also shot 43% from 3 last season for the Suns, and then efficient all the way across the board in the mid-range as well. A little bit undersized for this list. I think if Bradley Beal, instead of being 6'4", is like 6'6", 6'7", I think there's a huge argument to have him higher on this list. But if we're looking at like, who would I want to be playing small forward for my championship team, Bradley Beal is not like the first guy you're going to put on this list. But I think sneaky, a good defender. He routinely guards up for the Suns and is like relatively effective. Was definitely picked on in the playoffs against the Timberwolves, but I think the Timberwolves had like a pretty like uniquely jumbo roster that could really pick on the Suns for playing that small. Pretty good creator. My thing with Bradley Beal, especially with watching him a lot, tends to kind of have like mini meltdowns when the turnovers come. The turnovers come like in huge waves, and that just like tends to like creep into his shot selection and just his defensive engagement. But not a perfect player, but still a really, really good player.
You're kind of talking me. Okay, you kind of put me in this spot. I had Beal at 4, but now I kind of want to put him at 5. You've made a pretty good case here. The thing about Beal and what I like of him more than DeRozan, who I have at 7, or more than Ingram, who I had at 6, is just like, I like that, I'm looking. You can look at his basketball reference, and it's like when he's playing alongside like prime John Wall, the 3-point shooting percentage goes up. When he's playing on this Suns team where he's not having to self-create so much, the 3-point percentage goes up. And I like that he's just scaling so well with like other star players, because the thing about these lists to me is like anyone who's on that like 4 through 10 range in any of these, I care more about how you are off the ball a little bit more. The top 3 guys, that we're going to talk about, I care more about their self-creation. But for, that's why I'm not in love with the DeRozan or the Ingrams. They're just not these like elevators off the ball that I think Bradley Beal has kind of shown to be early in his career, now late in his career. Yeah, and the rim finishing is really good. It's actually percentage-wise, like his finishing percentage is a lot higher than a lot of the guys on this list. But I do think, like, defensively, he has some deficiencies. And like you said, like, the on-ball, it's okay. It leaves a little bit to be desired. And I think maybe I'm giving him a little bit of slack because of his role, since he's pretty much always playing out there with Booker or KD at this point in his career. Mm-hmm. I had DeRozan. Again, he's kind of Ingram, a guy I've never loved as a basketball player. He's taking way too many mid-range jump shots. And, I think people think of DeRozan as this guy who's like this super hyper elite mid-range shooter, and it's just not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of in that Ingram tier.
I had DeRozan at 6 for what it's worth, right around the same area.
Yeah, and the silver and DeRozan, again, he's actually not a good, unlike Brandon Ingram. The reason I had Ingram ahead of him is like Ingram maybe doesn't take enough threes, but at least Ingram is good at taking threes reliably. Like, you have to respect him standing over there. Like, DeRozan's just always in the like mid to low 30s in his 3-point percentage. He's not getting to the rim a ton. The one thing DeRozan does really well, better than anyone up and down this list other than a guy we have in the top 3. 2 guys in the top 3, actually, I think, is he's just getting fouled all the time. Sometimes his his foul rate is like near 20%. Like, to get fouled on almost 1 out of 5 of your shots is an impressive skill. The problem with DeRozan is I feel like his foul drawing hasn't scaled to the playoffs quite as well. And I don't know. I just don't love the, like, I'm going to take so many mid-range jump shots and I'm not going to finish them at the rate of an SGA or a Booker or a Luka, because the problem is like when you play that style, like, you just have a very hard ceiling on how good the team can be when someone whose usage rate is this high is taking that level of efficiency of a shot. Not that the efficiency is bad, it's just not elite enough for you to ever reach the heights of those teams that have done that with those types of players. And that's why I can't really put DeRozan higher than 7 or 6 for me.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. I had DeRozan where I had him pretty much because of his like playmaking, at least what he's shown. DeRozan has had kind of a harder job than almost any guy on this list, like of just what his team has been depending on him to do over the last couple years, from his time in Chicago. But for a forward, super high assist percentage, routinely in the 90 plus percentile, and not a guy that turns the ball over a lot, which I think is why he was able to get these last couple years of Bulls basketball into the play-in mix, just because he keeps that kind of like that floor a little bit higher. I'm interested to see what he's going to be like after we see him for a full season in this Kings infrastructure with other like really talented offensive players. But thus far, his shot diet has been pretty much exactly the same. He's been shooting a lot of like long mid-range shots, and he's relatively good at it. His percentages have been really, really good to start the season. Shooting 38% from 3 and still, or I guess like better than normal, like high 50s in the mid-range. Of course, that's on like less shots. I mean, I just like, we're really getting in the nitty-gritty with these guys, and I just think there's also just like a leadership element. I think DeMar DeRozan like seems to hold, and I like that in the regular season his workload scalability is like pretty large. Like you can put a lot on his plate and he can produce wins for you. I don't know that can happen in the playoffs, but that's a lot more than what you can expect from some of these other guys.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little bit more than you could expect from the guy I had at number 5, which is Khris Middleton.
Yes, I also had Khris Middleton at number 5.
Yeah, and the reason I have Middleton at 5, even though I don't know if he could do what DeMar does in terms of being like, I'm going to take 20 shots today that are largely self-created and I might create for others. What I like about Middleton is he's basically the same mid-range guy as Ingram and DeRozan. Basically shoots the same percentage, and he's also pretty self-created on those shots. So that's the kind of thing, that's why I really am not in love with Ingram and DeRozan. What I like about Middleton is he's a much more willing and a much better three-point shooter than both of those guys. I don't know if Middleton is the same defensive player as he kind of was at his prime, at his peak, especially, we haven't even seen him this year.
Yeah, no. I think he can still kind of turn it up, though, in the playoffs. I was really impressed with him in the few games that we saw him in the playoffs last season.
Yeah, and I think Middleton has shown that, like, when, Giannis isn't on the court, he can take on more of that scoring burden. He's never had to be the number one guy like an Ingram or DeRozan, but, like, I just think the way Middleton fits into championship level teams is so much cleaner than those other guys. I think he's a better defender than both of them, even at his older age.
He still has really great size, too, which just, like, is valuable in and of itself.
Yeah, so actually, after talking over Beal and Middleton, I kind of like him at 4, and I'll put Beal at 5. I know. I'll make that little switch. The reason I initially had Beal a little bit higher was just I think Beal has shown that when he does have that kind of help around him, he can really scale up his efficiency.
Yeah,
in a way that I think is a little bit higher than Middleton.
Yeah, the other thing that I love about Middleton that I think people don't talk about is you look at his entire career, this guy is a playoff riser. Every single time he gets to the playoffs, his points per game goes up and his efficiency stays pretty much where it is. And I think that's partially because you're playing next to Giannis, and he is just like an all-time like playoff problem that teams have to scheme completely against. But he's able to, prey upon that. And like last season, we saw him in his 6 games in the playoffs, average 24 points per game on like 48%, which is like all jump shots for the most part, and next to Dame, where it's like you're definitely not relaxing on defense next to a guy like that. But we saw that in the championship season as well. Of course, we're getting further and further away from that, but still like really, really elite stuff there. But yeah, to what you said, like this guy can play next to great players in a way that you just don't have to question at all. And he can do it off the dribble. He can do it catch and shoot.
Yeah, he's a great closeout attacker.
But it's just like all these guys right here, they're huge health question marks.
Huge health question marks, huge mid-range volume.
Yeah.
Massive mid-range volume, like a shocking amount for some of these guys.
Yeah, even Khris Middleton, it's like you wish he was shooting more threes.
Yeah, I think a lot of that for Middleton is attacking closeouts, though. I think he is really good at that like one dribble mid-range pull-up.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of his shot diet. Okay, so that means you have 4 more players?
I have 4 more players.
Okay. Okay. So that means you have Kawhi Leonard on your list.
Yes,
I just decided not to put him on the list because Kawhi Leonard doesn't play in the playoffs.
All right, here's my thing. Here's my thing about Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, he has a lower floor than these players, but he has a infinitely higher
ceiling.
Offensive and defensive ceiling than any of the guys below him. And I don't think any of these guys are such like, oh, if we have that guy, like we're championship contenders. Other than Kawhi Leonard. So I just like, we don't have to have a long discussion about him, but last season was super, super effective in the regular season. And he was just effective enough, and he wasn't able to make it to the playoffs. But hey, Khris Middleton can barely get on the court. Like,
that's true.
A lot of these guys really struggle with staying healthy. I don't know if we'll see Kawhi Leonard again. But if you're asking me just to like build a random playoff team and I have the 4th pick of the small forwards round, I'm going to pick Kawhi Leonard just in case.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I Kawhi Leonard, if I'm assuming health, and I guess I'm being a little hypocritical, putting guys like Middleton and Murphy on my list, but I think going forward, like it's kind of like why last year when we did our top 10 players list entering the season, I just didn't rank Kawhi either. I just don't believe he's ever going to play in the playoffs again. That's just the only reason. If we're going purely off like how good they are, of course he's on the list.
Yeah.
Okay, how did you? So obviously the other 3 guys. So wait, where did you end up putting Kawhi?
I put him at 4.
Okay. And that's just because of the health concern?
Yeah, that's because of the health concerns. I think he has a higher ceiling than you could argue all of the rest of the guys on this list. But the health does come into play, and that's why I had him at 4.
Yeah, so how do you rank between Paul George, Jaylen Brown, and Jimmy Butler?
So,
like, how do you possibly rank between these 3? I think all 3 of them are, like, super skilled, super awesome, and all 3 of them have, like, a giant glaring flaw you can point to.
Yeah, I mean, with Jimmy, it's just like taking the initiative to score.
Yeah, so Jimmy Butler's usage rate is down to 24% this year, which is it's like unacceptably low for a player of his stature. Like right now, granted, they've only played like 6-7 games. He's averaging 17 points per game. I know they played last night. I don't think that's factoring into the stats I put in. Field goal percentage wise, Jimmy's the least efficient of these 3 guys, but he gets fouled on like 1/4 of his shots.
Yeah.
Like Jimmy's the most elite foul drawing player in the entire NBA. There's been Harden in the past, there's been Embiid, but what has really separated Jimmy from those guys and why he's been such a successful playoff player is he still does that in the playoffs. He's still getting fouled a lot in the playoffs. I think Jimmy is still an absolutely elite perimeter defender, but what makes it hard with these top 3 guys is Jaylen Brown is also a super elite perimeter defender. Paul George on his podcast says he doesn't focus on defense as much this late into his career, but statistically, he's still a really good perimeter defender. So even if Paul George doesn't think highly of himself, he is pretty good at it. So I don't think there's this crazy argument you can just make that Jimmy's better because of defense over these other 2 guys. And I do think that like Jimmy has shown in the playoffs that his ceiling is way higher than Brown and George's, but that was 2 years ago now, and we're talking about 2024, 2025. I
see, but while saying that, you also have to like look at what Paul George was able to do last postseason, which was like, not encouraging at all. You know, this is Paul George was in a scenario where he didn't have Kawhi Leonard next to him. It was kind of like, hey, you're playing against this Dallas defense that honestly you should be able to kind of get whatever you want from. And he was able to produce 19 points per game in the playoffs, which, I mean, in my opinion, if I'm a Clippers fan, is just like not acceptable from a guy like Paul
when
George.
You consider one game Paul George went ballistic, which means in the other games when he didn't go ballistic, it's like it's kind of decrepit.
Yeah, shot 41% from the field. Like that's not Paul George. And if that's the era of Paul George that we're in, it's kind of concerning. And the other thing that we didn't really talk about for Jimmy Butler, I think you really nailed most of his case really well, is I think Jimmy Butler is the one guy of all three of these guys, even in like a great Paul George scenario, that I feel really comfortable just being like, hey, you're bringing the ball down every single time. You're running our offense. I want everything going through you offensively and defensively. I think that's something that Jimmy Butler offers that separates him a little bit from Jaylen Brown and Paul George.
Normally, I heavily weight the playoffs more than the regular season for these types of lists. But what makes it really hard with Jimmy is just like, if you are not going to take the regular, if you're going to play style wise so different than the regular season, the playoffs, to the point where it's hurting your team actively to getting good seeding in the playoffs, I think that has to factor in.
So who did you have 3?
George.
You had George 3. I also had George 3.
Yeah, I think George at this point in his career has shown he's probably better suited as like the ultimate role player.
Yeah, kind of what we were talking about with Khris Middleton.
Third star role better than, he's kind of a better Khris Middleton.
Yeah,
I think his self creation's a bit better. I think George is an elite volume 3-point shooter. I think the handle's there. I think the defense is still pretty much there. Now, I guess he actually played for Philly.
Yes, yesterday. He played last night. He did not have a very efficient shooting. But
he's back. We won't hold that against him.
First game back.
And the thing with Jaylen Brown, because we haven't talked about him at all, is I truly am worried that, like, are we overrating Jaylen Brown because we've never seen him on a bad team? Because he's the guy where like the plus minus and the eye test never line up. Watching Celtics games, it's like you love how much he's pressing. You love the defense. You love how aggressive he is taking to the rim, especially when that whole team falls in love with their jump shot a little bit too much. But there is a part of me that's like, all right, if we put Jaylen Brown on, I don't know, the Atlanta Hawks, are the Atlanta Hawks all of a sudden a 50-win team?
Yeah.
Also, but the thing is, maybe they are.
Yeah, they might be. But it's also the test of like, it's like, are you telling me that if you put Jimmy Butler on the Celtics, like, which version of the Celtics is better instead of Jaylen Brown?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's pretty tough. Like,
I think they'd be better with Jimmy.
Right?
I think they would be better with Jimmy. But I think I'm in this weird scenario with parts between Jaylen and Jimmy where we're not rating them on what they did last year. We're rating them on how we feel like they are going to be this year.
Yeah,
and we could very realistically be in the year where Jaylen Brown overtakes Jimmy, which isn't, a shot at Jimmy. Jimmy's like 35 years old.
Yeah, and Jaylen Brown coming off a playoff run where he's averaging 23, 5, and 3. The only other
finals and conference finals MVP.
The only other players in last year's playoffs to hit those benchmarks, Jaylen Brown, obviously, Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, Nikola Jokic, Shea, and Luka. These are all like the first people you think of when you think of first team All NBA are all of these guys. And Jaylen Brown is right there in that conversation. Like producing to that level, not even like a hypothetical, like, oh, he could be there. Like he is doing that in a long playoff run. But at the same time, like he is not like he's a good passer in a system. He can't like really create.
He's
like,
not to the level of Jimmy as a passer.
He's like an okay shooter, but he's not the shooter that I think everyone makes him out to be. He's around 34, 36, like that passable shooter in the best shooters ecosystem ever. He's pretty good at drawing fouls, not Jimmy Butler at drawing shooting fouls for sure, and sneakily a terrible free throw shooter. Did you see that?
Yeah.
He's like consistently in the bottom 10 percentile of wings and forwards for free throw shooting percentage.
The thing, you know what the thing with Jaylen though is what's tough about him and Butler especially is like Butler, it's like the usage rate is too low. He needs to take more shots. Jaylen, the usage rate is too high. He needs to take less shots and acknowledge his team environment.
But I wonder if that's why he works so well. Because he is the worst. He's kind of the worst shooter of the Boston, like, big six.
Yeah.
So it's like, does he work so well because he leverages that shooting so well around him? And if he didn't have that shooting around him and he still had that usage rate, he wouldn't be as effective? I don't know.
Yeah, that's my thing with Jaylen Brown is I've always found him to be like the most difficult player to kind of quantify how good is he, because he's just playing in this system that's just perfect for him. He's allowed to take a lot of bad shots because the team's overall defense, which he does contribute, is really good. He is a really good energizer for that team because he is a relentless rim attacker. I think that is a really valuable skill set, especially when we're looking at guys like Ingram, who's not shooting a lot at the rim, DeRozan, who doesn't take enough shots at the rim. It's like getting to the rim and taking a lot of shots at the rim is a valuable skill set, but it is one of those things where it's like, what does Jaylen Brown look like on the Charlotte Hornets?
Mm-hmm.
Does he bring the Charlotte Hornets to the playoffs? I don't know.
Yeah.
If you put Jimmy Butler on the Charlotte Hornets, I think they'd make the playoffs. Even with all of his regular season, what are you doing?
See, I don't know. Because, like, it's not like Jimmy doesn't have really elite infrastructure around him. I think, like, the fact that Jimmy, but it's on the defensive end.
Yeah, it's not on the offensive end.
In opposition for Jaylen Brown, I think it is on defense too, but it's on the offensive end that it just makes the Celtics, like, unbeatable. The Heat, to have a center defensively like Bam, like coupled with Jimmy Butler, like makes their floor, I think, just as high. Like a relatively like competitive team very high.
So who did you have at 1? Who did you have at 2?
I ended up putting Jimmy Butler at 1.
Same.
And Jaylen Brown at 2. Just because, I know it was 2 years ago, but I think the injury last season, right at the end, was kind of freak, and I think Jimmy Butler would have been incredible in the playoffs. I don't see any reason why to believe he wouldn't have been. I mean, I know there's some indicators that would say it, but I don't know. I just think Jimmy Butler is an all-time playoff riser, and I am willing to buy it.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think like it's important to remember, like, yes, Jaylen won Conference Finals MVP like Jimmy did the year before, but like Jimmy is the 1A guy on a team devoid of a lot of offensive options. Mm-hmm. And Jaylen is like the 2 guy on a team that's just completely overloaded with shooting.
Yeah.
All right. That was our list. So I had Butler at 1, Brown at 2, George at 3, Beal at 4, Middleton at 5, Ingram at 6, DeRozan at 7, Murphy at 8, Wagner at 9, and I switched Hart to 10.
And I had Butler at 1, Brown at 2, Paul George at 3, Kawhi Leonard at 4, Khris Middleton at 5, DeMar DeRozan at 6, Franz Wagner at 7, Bradley Beal at 8, Brandon Ingram at 9, and Josh Hart at 10.
Yeah, I think, I know we've said it on all of these, but this was by far the toughest list for me.
Yeah, this was weird. There was like so many people that we could have included. And I think you can make like really good arguments that exist there. But yeah, I don't know. The small forward position is just at a really weird place in its development in the NBA.
It feels like we're in an era of all-time small forwards playing in the league, and yet none of them were on this list because of this weird because of us. We made our weird positional rule when we came up with this exercise.
No, that's true, but I just feel like it wasn't long ago that it was like terrible to be like a tweener between a guard and a forward, and small forwards became so valuable because of that. And the same like big to small forward, but now like they've really all like went away from that middle area, and you're either like more of a guard or more of a big. And the small forward position, I think, is kind of weak because of that.
Yeah. All right. Shall we get to best take, worst take?
Let's get to best take, worst take.
What was your best take?
My best take of the week actually went to DeMar DeRozan after Drake said, if you ever put a DeMar DeRozan banner up, I'll pull that thing down myself. And DeMar DeRozan said in an interview, he's going to have to climb a long way. So tell him good luck. And I thought that was just like a great way to deal with it. I think DeMar totally deserves a banner in Toronto.
What?
Yeah, you don't think so?
For what? What did they accomplish?
It was their first ever time being relevant as a team.
They were relevant when Vince played. In terms of relevant,
kind of. They did not have the success that they had as with DeMar DeRozan.
But counterpoint, this is another reason DeRozan's low on our list. His teams are always worse when he's on the court, and that was true his entire Raptors tenure.
But, dude, for different franchises, I think there's different levels that you have to clear to get your number retired. I just personally, as a basketball historian, think DeMar DeRozan did enough in a Raptors uniform to where he deserves to have his number retired. I think he's done more for that franchise than I would argue Vince Carter.
No, for sure more. Well, but yes, more than Vince Carter, who they just retired. So I think that is a good case. But I would argue neither of them should have their number retired by the Raptors.
Yeah, I guess. But I think I'm a proponent for celebrating your history as you move along, even if it's not like even if you're not winning championships or something, because like it's kind of the only way to preserve it. For teams. And I think the DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry is 100% going to get his number retired when he retires. And I would say for the first, 7 years of the Kyle Lowry era, he wasn't the best player on their team. I think you could make a
legitimate argument that Pascal Siakam was a better Raptor than DeMar DeRozan was.
I think he should get his number retired too.
But I don't know. I guess I just don't agree DeMar should get his number retired. But all right. My best take is me and you.
Oh, hell yeah.
Me and you both, we disagreed on who the best shooting guard in the NBA is. You had Booker, I had Mitchell, and the NBA agreed with both of us. Booker and Mitchell won Player of the Week in both conferences.
There we go. How did we do it?
They're
both pretty good.
They're both good. Yeah, we said good players are good.
Yeah, the Cavs, Ishbia and Dan Gilbert are having a never-ending grudge match on who has the best two guard in the league. And their guys are both doing it for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if we have the same worst take.
Is it by Austin Rivers?
Oh, I forgot about Austin Rivers. Okay, you're going to win worst take of the week. But, okay, do you want to say it?
Yeah, so Austin Rivers said on his podcast this week that Karl Anthony Towns is more skilled than Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah, it's just a terrible take. I mean, Nikola Jokic is arguably top 10 most skilled player maybe
also,
ever.
Nikola Jokic is arguably the greatest floater taker in the history of the NBA.
Yeah.
Which I know both people wouldn't think about that, but no, that's an insane take. Also, for stretches of Jokic's career, he was shooting at the same level as Towns.
And I can make this really simple. If you're cheering for a team with Karl Anthony Towns or a team with Nikola Jokic, and they pass in the ball after a make to one of those guys, if Karl Anthony Towns is dribbling the ball down the floor, you are holding your breath if it's a high leverage moment. If it's Jokic, you have no problem at all. If that's not a mark of one player is more skilled than the other, I don't know what it is.
I mean, Austin Rivers is the guy who started the NFL, couldn't play in the NBA, NBA could play in the NFL, I guess, debate. And you know what? Maybe NBA has some more bigger, more athletic guys, but I would love to see Austin Rivers try to do what Saquon Barkley did last Sunday.
That was just unbelievable. I don't know if I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
To hurdle someone backwards.
Okay, I think you deserve to win the worst take of the week. Fine, but I do think, and maybe this is a little too old, but Jason Tatum said the Lakers didn't watch him work out pre-draft.
Wow.
So the Lakers, I guess, just made up their minds on Lonzo Ball and didn't even scout Jason Tatum, who was considered a top 5 prospect in that class the entire process through.
That was World Series champion Magic Johnson's era in Lakers history. So that I can't say that surprises me. But
you don't even watch the guy work out?
Hey, it was a different time.
Are just like, oh, we've got Brandon Ingram. We don't need Jason Tatum.
It was more, I feel like, hey, this guy's at UCLA. He's right down the street. He's going to be a huge star. We already have D'Angelo Russell. Who cares?
Oh, I remember. They're like, we have to trade Russell because he's a bad leader. It's like, Lonzo's 18. You don't know if he's a good leader
Isn't
or
that
not.
Crazy? Like, imagine if they just kept D'Angelo Russell, drafted Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
It would have been way better. Oh, my God. Lonzo would have fit so well on the Suns, and we wouldn't have drafted Josh Jackson. I like that.
Alternate history.
That alternate history.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, no, I don't. Then the Lakers would have got Jason Tatum.
Max, worst take of the week. The Lakers not even bothering to scout Jason Tatum, or Austin Rivers saying Towns is more skilled than Jokic.
I gotta give it to Austin Rivers.
Yeah.
Let's go. All right.
Austin Rivers, our worst take of the week.
Congratulations, Austin Rivers. Now it's time for Hot Streak Shooting Slump, where we review our week. And I will say we are recording this Tuesday morning, so whatever happens on the rest of Tuesday, November
it's not
5th,
factoring into our slump
we don't
or
know.
our streak, so do not interpret streak or slump based off the results of Tuesday night.
It's just 9:30 here
a.m.
in
And Patrick and I both stayed up till nearly 1 a.m. last night for other reasons.
Yes. Yeah, we're a little delirious.
Okay. Yeah. And speaking of delirious, I don't even know if I'm on a streak or a slump. I'm going to say I'm on a streak.
Okay.
I went to Las Vegas and I only lost $200 over the course of the weekend.
Nice.
I think that qualifies as a streak.
I guess it depends how much you gamble.
Yeah, well, I brought a $1,000 budget for the weekend, so I feel like to only lose 20% of it's pretty good. I learned how to play baccarat. I had a lot of joy. I have a slump moment that I think you guys will enjoy. So they have this thing called Stadium Swim in Vegas, where you basically book a table, kind of like a club, and then you have hot tubs, and there's just like tons of screens to watch sports. And so me and my buddies were like, oh, we're going to bet, a couple hundred on some NBA props, games, parlays, all that to go to the Stadium Swim and watch basketball. Sounds like a dream for a basketball podcast.
Sounds incredible.
Yeah, it turns out I forgot college football existed and is popular.
It is. It is very popular.
So we get there and they're playing no NBA games except for Rockets, Warriors. And I happen
marquee matchup of the night.
I happen to have taken Sengun over 17, Rockets 4.5 favorites, and I put the Rockets in a 14 parlay, which would have hit if it wasn't for these Rockets. These pesky Houston Rockets, they go down like 35 points, and Udoka takes this out on Sengun. He just benches him for like the entire game. I don't know what Sengun did to deserve to be benched, but great move by Udoka. The Rockets claw all the way back to get within one. And I'm like, there's no way. If the Rockets can pull this off, I'm literally going to make like $200.
That you would have been, you would have hit back your...
Yeah, I would have made all my money back. The Rockets go up by 1. They go down by like 5. I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but it leads to the Rockets being down 3 with like 5 seconds left. Draymond Green turns the ball over on an inbounds pass. They hit a 3. They go to overtime, and I'm like, this is it. They have to come back and win. They're at home, down 35, and no, they just lay the bed in overtime. They don't score at all. Sengun doesn't see the court at all.
What happened to Clutch City?
Yeah, what happened to Clutch City? So that was a bad beat. And so Rockets have been hyping you up on this podcast, and I'm just a little disappointed in you.
You couldn't have done it for your guy.
Yeah, and I kind of want to criticize Udoka for benching Sengun, but they also came back, so I don't know. Can I? Am I allowed to in that circumstance?
You know what? Since you lost a bet because of it, I think you are.
But I might have only had a chance because of it. I don't know.
That's true. Might have been worse.
How I feel. Yeah.
Might have been worse. I'm on a slump.
I don't like the way you said it.
I was sick like at the end of last week. And it kind of just hit me on Halloween.
Oh, this is a sequel because last week your fiance was sick.
Yeah.
And so you caught it.
So I ended up getting sick. So just kind of like a down weekend, not feeling great. Just had to cancel all plans, which is fine. I actually had the chance to watch a lot of NFL football this week, and that's a pretty good product.
Yeah.
Let me say.
It was a good week.
It was a really good week. I feel like there were so many like insane highlight plays, like the interception at the end of the Eagles Jacksonville game was insane. We already talked about the Saquon jump. There was a couple other plays that were crazy that I can't
The Garrett
think
Wilson
of.
one-handed catch.
Yeah, the Garrett Wilson one-handed catch was crazy. I'm kind of like extrapolating this not this shooting slump because I have a dentist appointment today where I'm going to get a root canal, which is not going to be fun. I've been there before, but we're going back. We're going back under the knife once again. That will not be fun, but here we are. That's all I have to say.
I think we have a slump ahead of us. Can I just read you like some names that we have to parse between?
Yeah.
Giannis, LeBron, Tatum, Durant, Banchero, Zion, Pascal, Evan Mobley, Scotty Barnes, Julius Randle, Draymond Green, Aaron Gordon,
Jesus Christ.
Jabari Smith Jr., Keegan Murray. I mean,
I don't think you're going to make it, Jabari. I'm worried about you, buddy.
yeah, I don't know if Jabari Smith Jr. is going to make it either, but it just goes to
He would
show.
have maybe made today's list.
I think it just goes to show how much more talented right now that the power forward position is. Like if Paolo Banchero was a small forward, like would he
would maybe be one.
maybe be one, and
Yeah.
he's not going to be top 4 next week, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. No, it's definitely going to be a tough one. Maybe the tough. I don't know. I think probably the position with the highest overall, like just talent in competition with the point guards list.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm excited to do it. It'll be fun. And I hope you guys will all be back next week to see what we come up with.
Yep. All right, we'll catch you guys next week. Peace.